Hello, welcome back. If you are new here, welcome. My name is Charlie, and typically at the end of every month, I come on here and I talk about the books that I've read and the games that I've played in this past month, the books that I want to read and the games that I want to play in the coming month. And then I'll talk about the channel stats for the last month, like how the channel has been doing, how those videos that I put out this month have been doing, and then a little bit about channel plans for the next month, things that I'm going to focus on, maybe things that I'm going to change, things like that. But in today's video, I'm going to do it a little bit differently because this is not just the end of December, it's the end of 2024. So I will be talking more about just the year as a whole, kind of summarizing my year in terms of, the highlights of my reading. I have like 5 kind of awards or 5 books that I want to highlight for various different reasons. I don't really track my board game habits, so I won't be talking about the board games that I played in 2024, but I think in 2025 I will start tracking my board game habits so that I can include that in this style of video in the future. After talking about the reading stats and highlights, I'm going to shift into talking about channel stats, just sort of how the channel did in this past year, although I've only been here for 4 months, so just talking about that, how the channel has grown in these past just over 4 months. And then I'll shift into a more typical topic of just like what I plan to do next month, the books that I want to read in January of 2025. And then I'll close it out with just, a little bit of channel updates, channel plans for 2025, which, most things are going to stay the same, but I have a couple ideas and things that I think I will be trying out in the new year. But without further ado, let's dive in. If you've been watching my videos recently, you know that I don't think that the number of books that a person reads is important, but I do keep track of the number of books that I read. So I'm going to start this by talking about that number. If you look at my Goodreads or my hardcover, both of which I link in the description of every video, you'll see that I read 45 books, or at least I've marked 45 books as read on Goodreads. There are some things that I've read that aren't on there, like little short stories and about 1 million children's books, but Goodreads shows 45 books. A couple of those books are kind of tracked weirdly in Goodreads. I have the UK editions of the Stormlight Archives, for example, and so those are broken up into 2 books. And I do typically add part 1 and part 2 to my Goodreads just because they're on there, and I like to keep track of like my page count, my pages read in Goodreads as I go along reading a book. So the number is like a little inflated because of things like that. But zooming in, I really read like 20 full-length novels this year, plus 13-ish novellas and short stories, and 12 comic books. That includes like graphic novels, one-shot comics, and manga as well. The distinction between novella and novel is just, I kind of just cut it at like 200 pages. So if a book is over 200 pages, I'm lumping it into that full-length novel category. But if it is under 200 pages, I'm just putting it in the novella category. Some of the books in that novella category are really short stories, like 50 pages or something like that. 4 of the full-length novels that I read this year were massive, so like 1,000 plus pages, which is cool. I don't know, that's something. 3 of them were Stormlight Archives books, and then the other was Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. All fantastic, all really earned their page count by the end. Oathbringer was a little dicey, in my opinion, for like the first half of it, but it earned it by the end of it. When I was looking through these books and I was picking out my favorites, they very naturally fell into these kind of 5 categories, which I'm just going to kind of use as like 5 awards that I'm going to give out to these books. The first one is going to go to an author, so a new author that I checked out this year that I really connected with. The second is going to go to the most inventive sort of like setting in a book. Then I'm going to talk about the most fun book I read, so not necessarily the best book, but the book that I had the best time reading it in terms of just like fun. And then I'm just going to talk about the best novella that I read and the best full-length novel that I read. Probably the hardest one for me to pick was the best new author. New to me, I mean. These authors are not new at being authors. I hadn't read any of their books until this year. I think most of the books that I read this year were written by authors that I hadn't read before, which was really cool and wasn't really something that I realized until I started looking through my my list, but 5 of them really stood out, and I really had a hard time picking which of these I wanted to highlight. So I'm going to quickly brush over my 4 kind of honorable mentions for this one, and then I'll give you the top, the highlight. I really wanted to read something by Jim Butcher this year, and I thought that was going to be Dresden Files and when I started the year, and I was really excited about that. But then I joined a buddy read of Furies of Calderon, which is a book by Jim Butcher that I hadn't even heard of until it was selected for this buddy read. So I was excited. I was going to read some Jim Butcher. That was exciting to me. I was looking forward to it. I read it. It was okay. I'm not going to say that it was okay. People love that book. It's a good book. It wasn't for me. I didn't connect with it. I didn't really connect with the characters. There were some choices made by the author that didn't feel right to me, or I felt uncomfortable reading some of the scenes, I guess is a better way to say that. If you are going to read this book, maybe check out the trigger warnings. I learned from reading that book that there are some things that I'd prefer not to read about. So, it was fine. I did finish the book. I think I gave it 3 stars, maybe 3.5. I think looking back that maybe that's a book that I should have DNF'd, but whatever. It was fine. I didn't hate it. So I wasn't super sold on Jim Butcher after having read that first book, but I still wanted to try more. So I gave him another shot and I read book 1 of Dresden Files, and I loved it. It still had some issues. Jim Butcher still wrote some things that I still didn't want to read, and there were things that the character did and said that I was like, I really wish that wasn't in here. But I've heard Jim Butcher as an author kind of grows out of that as the series goes on, and the rest of what was happening in the book did work for me in such a way that I didn't mind those other things so much. Not that I think that they're entirely justified, but knowing that he grows out of it and knowing that the rest of the book, like the characters and the world that he's creating, was like cool enough and interesting enough for me to continue through the book and want to read the rest of the series. If you don't know, Dresden Files is like an urban fantasy, and it follows a wizard who is a detective, and he goes through and he solves crimes, and it's got a little bit of like Monster of the Week flair to it, and it's just fun. It's not just fun. There's more to it than just fun. I will give it that, but it is certainly fun. So I definitely considered Jim Butcher for this category because I was thinking back to reading the Dresden Files, and I was like, well, of course that is gonna take it. Even though I've only read 1 book, I'm super jazzed about that book. But then I remembered that I did read Furies of Calderon, and that was by the same author, and that I didn't love that book. So he's not gonna get any awards today. And then I thought Matt Dinneman might get this award because I read Dungeon Crawler Carl and Carl's Doomsday Scenario this year, and I had a great time. But then I kept looking down the list, and I also read JCM Byrne this year, who I read a short story of his, Zero Twist, and I read Wistful Ascending. Again, I had so much fun with those books. But then I kept scrolling and I read Emily Tesh this year. She's terrific. I read her Green Hollow duology, and I've talked about that duology several times here on the channel. I love these books, especially Silver in the Wood. Fantastic. But as much as I loved that duology, I'm not necessarily finding myself like reaching for my next Emily Tesh read like I am with those other authors I just mentioned, which made me think, which of the authors that I've read this year, like for the first time, am I finding myself like thinking about a lot? Like who's the author that I am most excited to read the next book from? And that has to go to Morgan Stang. Morgan Stang wrote Murder at Spindle Manor and the rest of the Lamplight Murder Mystery series. And I can't stop thinking about this book. I've mentioned it several times here recently, and I've mentioned several times too that I cannot wait to pick up books 2 and books 3. They were just on sale for $1 in the Kindle store, and I just bought both of them, I think yesterday, and I can't wait. I can't wait. I need to know more of what's happening in Morgan Stang's brain. I need to find out more about the world that he's crafted in this first book, and I need to see more from these characters, and I just want more, and I can't wait to get back into Morgan Stang's brain. So I feel very confident with this choice. There's no question in my mind that out of the authors that I've read for the first time this year, Morgan Stang takes the cake. He was the one that had me the most engaged while reading his story, and the one whose story has really sunk its teeth into me, and I can't shake it. It is in my brain. So best new to me author, Morgan Stanning. The next category was the most inventive setting, kind of. So this is not necessarily just about the magic system or like, just a world, because some of the books that I've read aren't really set on a world. So it's just the setting as a whole. For this category, I pretty quickly ended up narrowing it down to 2 books. The first one I thought of kind of right away was Sister Samurai. This is a novella that I read at the beginning of the year that I don't think I've mentioned here on the channel yet, but I do think that the world created in this book is really interesting, and the character too, and beyond all that, the magic system I thought was really clever. They have this ink-based magic system. It's like in the world of Sister Samurai, they have this, I think they call it Tamashi ink, and it's this ink that is kind of used as like currency in the world. Like you can buy things in exchange for ink, but you can also have this ink like kind of imbued with magic, and then you can use that ink to paint kind of like a symbol or like a rune or whatever, some icon on kind of anything to put magic into that thing. So for example, you could write like, fire or something on like a sword, and then your sword is on fire and you can use that until the magic like wears off. Or you could put some sort of protective ward on your house by kind of just, again, painting something on your house with this ink. But it's a little more complicated than that too, because you can't just buy like really strong ink. You buy ink that is infused with the magical abilities, but it's also about like you as a person and how strongly you're feeling about the magic that or like the spell that you're about to write and like infuse on something. So really interesting. I loved that concept of very intentionally painting something on kind of anything and giving it some sort of ability for a little bit of time. And I really loved that in that world where that magic is kind of accessible to anybody that can afford to buy the ink, it also then becomes part of the currency. I don't know. I thought that was really neat. And the book also did this really cool thing where on one of the first pages of the book, the author gives you a playlist to like listen to in the background of while you're like reading a chapter, which was really cool. So that book stuck out in my mind, and I wanted to mention it here because I haven't talked about it yet, but I think it's worth your time. It wasn't like one of the best books I've ever read, but I could see it being a favorite for a lot of people. But there was a book that I read this year that kind of topped that even in the complexity of the world, and that is The Tainted Cup. I've talked about The Tainted Cup a lot here recently too, so I won't go too in depth here, but the world here is awesome and really just really creative and unlike anything else that I've been reading. And something that was done really well with this world is that you're only teased with it. Like there's so much more that I want to get out of this world, but it's not given to you in this book. So you're left with a lot of questions, which adds a lot to the intrigue of this world. So the characters that we're introduced to are awesome, and they live in this setting that is, terrifying, but also incredible. Like there's giant monsters that kind of come out of the water and try to attack the city that they're in, which is a big deal, but also hardly at all explored in the book. And then there's also this like insane, like kind of magic system in the book where you can have like a procedure done or take some sort of drug or whatever that changes you, like alters you. I think they call it alterations. And it's this sort of like genetic manipulation, and it can be cognitive or it can be physical. And this too is something that's only barely explored in the book. Like I think we only really learned about like 2 abilities that you can get through these alterations. There's this one where you can enhance your memory, and there's this other one where you can enhance your like physical prowess. And again, this is like a place where like I want to know more, and I want to explore more of what the author has created in this space. And so I'm really looking forward to that in future books from this author. The coolest part about the magic system, if you could call it that, is that these alterations that you choose to take on come at an extremely high cost, which again, I think that's really cool. So this wins. There's this plant life I want to know more about. There's monsters that I want to know more about. There's magic that I want to know more about. And it's all got me hooked on this series. And so this, no question, gets the most interesting setting award. Now, the next three categories, I don't have any honorable mentions. These are just, there's a category and there's a book. And these were really easy for me to pick. I thought of the category and boom, I already had an answer. 3 in a row. It was easy. The first one, most fun. This, hands down, no questions asked, goes to Dungeon Crawler Carl. This book is fantastic. And I do mean Dungeon Crawler Carl specifically over Carl's Doomsday Scenario, which I also really liked Carl's Doomsday Scenario, but Dungeon Crawler Carl wins for sure. Maybe just because of like the novelty of reading this first book, like the first of its kind of for me. Like I haven't read any other lit RPGs and anything like that. So it was just so, I don't know, it was unique and I loved it. This book and this series kind of as a whole is kind of blowing up this year. Like it's having a bit of a moment. So you've probably heard about this book. I mean, I've even talked about it several times here on the channel. But if you somehow don't know what this book is about, I will really briefly just explain that. The book is set here on Earth, and we follow Carl as he goes outside of his building to rescue Princess Donut, the cat, from a tree. As soon as he gets outside, all of the buildings on the planet collapse, and millions of people die, and the rest make their way down into tunnels where they find this dungeon, and they discover that they are now on the set kind of this intergalactic game show, kind of Hunger Games style, where they have to make their way down through the dungeon, kind of surviving, and whoever survives the longest gets some reward and they get to live, I guess. And in each book we are learning more and more about these characters and more about the people putting on the game show and more about the beings that are in the dungeon and like the obstacles that are within the dungeon and where they come from and what are their origins, and it's really cool. And it is, like I said, a lit RPG, which I had never read before, but after reading this, I definitely want to check out more. I love a book that makes you want to check out a whole new kind of genre of books. So big props to Matt Dinniman for doing that for a lot of people, getting a lot of people into lit RPGs as a whole. While this book does have a lot of hard-hitting moments and like there's a decent amount of depth here, even more throughout the series apparently, but there was a good amount already here in book 1 and in book 2 as well. But it also is just so much fun. It's so much fun. The sense of humor works perfectly for me. It doesn't work for everybody, but it really landed with me, and I loved it. I had a blast reading through it. I cannot wait to pick up book 3 soon. The audiobooks also are just tremendous. I read it however you want to read it. If you prefer a physical book, that you don't like audiobooks, whatever, go ahead, do that. But I strongly urge you to check out the audiobook for this one. I have not listened to a book with a better narrator than Jeff Hayes. Very impressive. And he just adds to the fun. He's got a ton of voices for all the different characters in here, bunch of sound effects. It's really, really well done. 10 out of 10 overall enjoyment in terms of fun. Fantastic book. Fantastic series. Cannot wait to continue it. For best novella of 2024, I had to give it to Silver in the Wood. I think about this book all the time. Emily Tesh has such a beautiful style to her writing. I love a good folklore or fairy tale or reimagining of a story, retelling of a story. I'm not even familiar really with the folklore that this is, a reimagining of, but it didn't matter. It had that feel, that folklore feel to it. And it follows also a character who is a folklorist. So they study characters from folklore. It was really good. It really embodied the feeling of folklore. I don't know how really to explain that, but you're set in this mystical wood and you follow these characters who instantly grab onto your heart, and it's it was beautiful. It was beautiful. It was really, really, really good. And it was also, high stakes stuff happening, but at the same time, it's like a bit of a romance, which like I'm not really a romance reader. So for me to give such high praise to a book that is at its core a romance between two men, it's really high praise. I really want more people to read this book. I highly recommend it. If you need a short book and you like what I just said about it, if that sounds good to you at all, I strongly suggest that you pick this one up. But then my absolute book of the year, no questions. This I didn't even considering a different book for this this category. This has to go to Christopher Buehlman's The Daughter's War. This took me by surprise. I considered at some point, adding in like a most surprising read of the year, but I took it out because this would have won it also. I had no expectations for this book, honestly. I read The Black-Tongued Thief last year, and I really liked it. I thought it was a lot of fun, and I wanted book 2. I was excited to get a second book in the series, and I heard that Christopher Buehlman was going to write more in the series around that book. And then this book was announced, and I was like, oh, okay, it's a prequel. Like, that's kind of cool, I guess. Like, I could learn more about these characters. But then I found out that it's not a prequel following the main character in The Black-Tongued Thief, but kind of the side character or like a secondary character, because she does feel like, she's very critical to The Black-Tongued Thief. She's a very important character, but not the main character for sure. And I didn't really know if I needed to know more about her. She was cool. I wanted to know more about, sort of the things that she deals with, like the magic that she kind of deals with. I would have liked to know more about that, but I didn't feel like I needed a prequel novel to hear about that. So, whatever, sure. I'll read that. I wasn't super stoked on it though. But then we got closer and closer to the release date, and for whatever reason, I started getting more into it. Like I think I watched a couple of Christopher Buehlman's interviews, and I was like, oh wait, that's a super cool guy. I think he's really neat. And I heard him talking about the process of writing this book and how he had started writing book 2 of The Black-Tongued Thief, but he felt he couldn't really tell more of the story of the two characters, Kinch Nishana and Galva, without delving deeper into Galva's backstory and figuring out kind of for himself who this character is. And so that was really interesting to me. Like, wow, this must be a really core component if to the future books, if he's decided that he has to take a break from that and go back and write an entire novel to explore this character. So, okay, I started getting excited. And then it got here and I picked it up and I started reading it, and I was blown away. I can't recommend this book highly enough. I thought the writing was gorgeous. I found myself rereading sentences and paragraphs and entire pages just because there were things said in such a way that just it resonated with me. It was terrific. It was so different too from The Black-Tongued Thief, because The Black-Tongued Thief felt almost like a D&D campaign, like on the fun side. Like it was like fun and exciting and fast paced and all of that, and it was funny too. It was a funny book. But The Daughter's War is it's so different. It was a little deeper and a little more introspective, and it told a brutal story of this devastating war, and the story was told through the eyes of this character, Galva, who just has a great backstory. And the animal companions too that are in this book were awesome too. They're not like cute, fluffy little animals that follow you around and they're there for like comedic relief or whatever. They're full-bodied individuals. Like they're these giant corvids, they're called, and I feel like I shouldn't have cared about these characters, but I did. They were awesome. They were interesting, and they're unique. I've not read about or watched about or anything about animals like this. The things that happen to this character and honestly to the world in this book in that this series is set in. It's got to be. It's so critical to the story. And I wouldn't have guessed that for some reason. Like, I mean, the Daughter's War is referred to a ton in The Black Tongue Thief, but kind of as a background thing. Like, oh yeah, this happened in the war, whatever. But now I feel like I lived through parts of that war. And I feel like I don't know how else to explain it. It's so good. I think about it often. Whenever book 3 comes out, I think I will probably do a reread of The Black Tongue Thief and The Daughter's War so that it's really fresh in my mind, because it was just tremendous. It was really good. I want more people to read Christopher Bjornman. And I did read Between Two Fires also this year, which is another one of his books, more of like a horror book, which he was primarily a horror author before writing these two like just fantasy books. And that was also terrific. But yeah, book of the year, Daughter's War, no question. Cannot wait for more Christopher Bjornman. I'm hoping to slowly work my way through the rest of their catalog, and they have absolutely become an auto-buy author for me. Anything that they drop, I will be picking up day one, going forward forever now. I read a lot of really great books this year. I'm very satisfied with the year that I had in terms of the books that I've read, the things that I've read. My overall enjoyment of reading has been very high. And I do think that starting this channel has helped me to get even more into the hobby. So I'm going to shift gears to talking about how the channel has been doing in this year. Like I mentioned, I've been on here now on YouTube for just over 4 months. My first video went up on August 29th. It says here on the paper where I wrote it down. That was my BookTube newbie tag where I introduced myself and my reading habits. And right away, conversation picked up in the comments and people started engaging, and I was having a lot of fun. And since then, we have grown quite a bit. In November, at the end of November, I had mentioned that we were up to 246 subscribers, which is crazy. That was wild. And then from there, in December, we've almost doubled that somehow. We're at 424 subscribers at the time of this recording, which is really, it is mind-blowing to me. That's crazy. So thank you so much, all of you who have subscribed, and to everybody that has just come here, even if you're not a subscriber, because 80% of the viewers are not subscribers. But whatever, that's fine. I thank you for stopping by and watching any amount of this content. Especially to those of you who have been commenting. And that's what I want to talk about next, the comments. This is so cool. Slight related tangent before I get into this next bit about the comments. But in this time, this just over 4 months of putting out videos here, we've gotten over 10,000 views, 10,300-ish views in total across the 17 videos that have been put out. This video that you're watching right now is the 18th video that I've made. That has generated over 1,000 hours of view time. So people have collectively watched me talk about books and board games sometimes for over 1,000 hours, which is wild, absolutely absurd. And 2 of the videos that I put out this month have been viewed over 1,000 times, which is insane. Again, that's wild. I don't know why that happened. I don't really understand YouTube and why that is the case, that sometimes a video will just like go off. But I had 2 in a row that got over 1,000 views. And again, that's so cool. That's super exciting. And again, I really appreciate that. But beyond that, what I think is even cooler is that last week's video, the video where I talk about my 2025 reading goals, that video only got around 250 views, right? And that is still, that's huge. That's a big number for my channel, for my videos. That typically before that, anywhere from like 1 to 300 views is kind of standard to what I see. So that's on the higher side, and that's awesome. I'm super happy with the performance of that video. And we're finally getting to my point here. That video with 250 views has just as many comments as the 2 prior to it, which is about like 40-ish comments, which is so cool. And the reason I think that's cool is because, I can get over 1,000 views on a video, right? And that feels good. That's a lot of fun. But I'm doing this for the engagement side of it, right? I think it's really fun to talk to people in the comments about books and to have things recommended to me and to hear people say that they also enjoyed the books that I've mentioned, or even if they didn't enjoy it, I hear differing opinions, or they tell me like, oh, the way you talked about that book made me want to pick it up. And I love that because I would love to have more people read the books that I've enjoyed so I can talk to more people about them. Because I don't really have a ton of people in my real life that read the kind of books that I read. And the fact that I can put out a video that has like a more standard for me number of views and still get the same number of comments, I think that's so cool, because that means to me that there's like a little bit of a community forming here, right? When I get 40 comments on a video, that really means that I got 20 comments and I commented back, like I replied to those 20 comments. So, a little community here of 20 commenters kind of that are like almost like regulars, right? Like people that are coming back. So if that's you, if you've been here and you've been watching my videos and commenting on them, really huge thank you to you. Thank you for coming back, watching more, and engaging with me in the comments and in the conversation. I really appreciate it. And if you have been here and you haven't drop down into the comments yet, but you've been enjoying this and you want to be more a part of the community, do it. I love it. Keep it going. I really encourage you to drop down there and join us in the conversation. If you're in that 80% of viewers that's not subscribed, consider converting into the 20% as well. You don't have to. There's no pressure, but I don't know. It could be fun. Consider it. The top performing video of this year is still the top 10 fantasy books video that I put out, which has almost 5,000 views now. I think the last time I checked, 4,700 views ish, which is awesome. And that has 80 comments on it, which is nuts. That's nuts. That's absolutely nuts. It also has 209 likes, which is wild. So yeah, anyway, that's how the channel did. The channel did well. I'm very pleased with how the channel has been doing. And I am absolutely going to be continuing this into the new year and hopefully beyond, as long as this keeps being fun. Finally, really quick, I'm just going to talk about January, what I want to do, what I want to read in January of 2025. This is kind of weird because I'm still reading Wind and Truth, right? So I haven't finished that yet. I've been doing my best, but it's big. So I made a decent chunk in this, and I'm loving it. So I will be finishing this soon. I don't think I'll finish it by the end of the year. So that will probably spill over into January, which is totally fine. And then I'm also really enjoying Lost Ark Dreaming, but I'm almost nowhere in this. I've started it. I'm a little bit of the way through it. And again, I'm really enjoying it. I think if I finished both of these books, there's a chance they might have fit onto my highlights list somewhere. Like I could see already this potentially being my novella of the year, but we'll see. Maybe it'll be 2025's novella of the year because I will finish it in 2025 most likely. But anyway, if I do finish one of those, I will be picking up one of the following: either Harbinger of Justice by Andrew Watson, or I'll pick up Empire of Silence by Christopher Rocchio, I think is how you pronounce that last name. Which if I read that one, it'll be part of the buddy read by Andrew Watson, who is the author of Harbinger of Justice. So that's kind of a funny one to be stuck between. Either read his book or read a book with him is kind of my choice there. And then the other one that I'm hoping that I can get to next month as well will be I want to start reading Robin Hobb. So Assassin's Apprentice might be something that I read next month. That or probably two of those three books is going to shift into February, but one of those most likely I will get to this month or next month, January. I'm also hoping to pick up The Paper Menagerie, which I have upstairs on my shelf. I forgot to bring it downstairs, but that is a short story collection that I want to kind of slowly work my way through. I'm kind of thinking like I want to read one of the short stories in that book every month. And I was also kind of considering, because one of my commenters, Alvin, hi, thank you, had said that they want to read it too. And they said like, buddy read, do you want to do a buddy read? And so I'm considering it. I don't know if that's like something that people would be actually interested in, but I was thinking like a really easy way to start kind of toying with doing buddy reads here on the channel could be with The Paper Menagerie, could be with short stories. So I might just start a Fable. I mean, I have an account on Fable, so I might just start a Fable like group and just add all of the books that I'm reading. And if you're watching and you want to join that Fable, like, go for it. And you can follow along on Fable as well with what I'm reading. And if you want to join in, you could join in. I think that's how Fable works, at least. So that's my thought. I'm considering it. And that kind of spills into my next section, which is my 2025 plans. So yeah, the first channel plan for 2025 is I want to start doing buddy reads. I think that'd be really fun. And again, I think we have a little bit of a community here, and I would love to just interact with you more. And how better to do that than a buddy read? So I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to just start a Fable after I finish recording this and start putting my thoughts out on that Fable. So if you do have the Paper Menagerie and you want to join in on at least that one, yeah, feel free. I'll put the link to the Fable down in the description once it's set up, and you could join in. I think it'll be really slow paced, really low stakes, little buddy read. Beyond that, like I said, I'm really happy with the channel. I'm really happy with how it's been growing and how it seems to be continuing to grow. And I have every intention to continue going forward with it. So not a ton is going to change, really. I want to go back to making board game content, which I didn't talk about board games at all this month, but I really like board games. And I have a few people in the comments that say that they like that too. They like board games and they like books. And so I do want to go back to doing that. So that'll be coming back. I'll be continuing making content about board games. I will also be continuing my TBR Cole series. So I've got a few videos out in that like series, and I want to go back to that too. I also didn't do that this month just because I wanted to do a lot of this end of the year stuff, because again, I think that's fun. So that will be coming back as well. So if you like those are here. They will be back in January. I definitely also want to start doing some more formal book reviews. So videos where I talk about just a single book. Those will probably be shorter videos, I think. We'll see. I ramble a lot, so maybe they'll end up being long, but I wanted to start doing that. Not for every book that I read, but for the standouts. Reviews on books, I think, but also probably reviews on authors, because I think it could be fun every now and then to just do like an author highlight. Like if I read a few more Christopher Bjornman books, I would love to do just like an author highlight of Christopher Bjornman and talk about my experience with all of their books that I've read up till that point. I'm also considering, because this is like, it's a books first channel with board games kind of in the background. So I'm considering making the board game video like a 5th video every month instead of just like having it take up a slot every week. I'm toying with that. In January, that probably won't happen. I'm going to have 4 videos in January, but we'll see. Maybe February, I sneak in a 5th video. Maybe that 5th video is like the review, but maybe that gets like the prime time slot, and I just slide in the board game video somewhere else in the month when it's ready, because they do take kind of more work. So I could just slowly put them together over the course of the month and put them out whenever they're ready. Toying with that in terms of changes. That's probably like the biggest change that I'm considering. And then the last thing this one's not really like a change, but it's more like a hope for the channel, is that I want to do collabs more. Like I want to talk to my other friends that are also YouTubers on their channels, have them on this channel, and just partner up with people. And that's really, it's just because it looks fun. I've only done it like a couple of times so far, but it's been really fun to just like make an appearance on somebody else's channel. So yeah, I think that would be cool too. But that's, again, not really a plan. It's not something that I can make happen by myself, because I need somebody else to also want to do that with me. So, whatever, that's a plan. I think that would be fun. And that's kind of it, I think, in terms of like channel planning, and I don't really have like, I'm not setting like a subscriber goal or anything like that, because that doesn't really matter, right? It'd be cool to keep growing the community and the channel and all that, but I'm happy with where we're at right now. So no more like goals really for the channel, just plans to keep doing it. And so that brings us to the end of this video. I want to say thank you just one more time to all of you who have stopped by, even if this is your first time today. And to those of you who found me earlier on and you keep coming back week after week, just a really sincere, deep thank you. Again, you're making this so much fun, and that's all it's about. It's been very fun. I've been enjoying myself, and I hope that you have too. If you have any feedback for things that I do on the channel that you'd like to see change, or if you have any feedback for things that I mentioned here that I plan on doing in the future, let me know. And also just let me know what you're reading this week. I would love to hear it. What are you transitioning into the new year with? Do you plan on joining us for any buddy reads that we do here on the channel? It'd be cool to sort of gauge interest in that sort of thing as well. Yeah, let me know. Let me know anything that you're thinking right now. Just drop that in the comments. And I will see you next week. Bye.